Hello and welcome to today's edition of Pegasus Test. On today's edition, we're going over training scar number 8, the AUG. So I've made a whole rifle a training scar. Well, I guess I owe you some explanation here. So what this is the Steyr AUG A3M1. That means it's the NATO stock, takes STANAG mags, not standard AUG mags. And it doesn't have a bolt open device, whereas the standard AUG would. This one, of course, is in black instead of green, and it has a 16-inch barrel instead of a 20-inch barrel. And when I first got the rifle, I shot a match, just a local two-gun match at the two-gun AGCM at Fairfax Rod and Gun Club, and I realized the manual arms was super different. I kind of knew that going in, but I didn't realize how different. And on the clock, it really messed me up. It played the brain game with me. And I decided at that point, I'm like, you know what? This is the year I'm going to master, using that term very loosely, this rifle and learn its manual of arms so I can employ it effectively. So I used it in a couple more local matches. I then took it to Finland with me, and I used it at the Hatila 23 and at Finnish Brutality 23. And I will put links at the end of the video somewhere around here so you can check out those playlists, because they show me using the rifle, good and bad. And there is good and bad to this. Just because this is a training scar video does not mean this is a bad weapon system. No, it doesn't at all. It means it's a very different weapon system from what you may be used to. I would say probably that if this was my issued rifle, being in the Austrian or Australian or New Zealand armies, I'd probably think ARs and AKs were weird. But we're going to go a different way because I cut my teeth on the AR. The first big training scar that you have with this is the safety works different. And that's very important, especially in a match environment. With your AR, you flick your thumb down and it goes from safe to fire. With your AK, you swipe the side of the receiver and it goes from safe to fire. This is a crossbolt safety. It doesn't work like that like either of those rifles do. No, if it's got common with anything, it's got common with an 870 shotgun, believe it or not. So that's your first training scar right there, is you got to get used to, okay, I'm going on to fire. When I'm done, pushing my thumb and I go to safe. Fire by that way, and then my thumb, I'm back on safe. Now, to be fair to this weapon system, once you get used to it, it's pretty intuitive, and by the time Finnish Brutality rolled around, it was not a problem. Strangely though, because it was such an unfamiliar weapon system, the ROs were more worried about it than I was, and I had to, on some stages, make a very overt display of putting on the safety, sometimes by, when it being on fire, reaching up with the other hand and pushing down with on safe. But hey, if it makes the RO happy, it's worth doing. The other thing about this that is a scar is this forward grip right here. This is pretty much how you have to employ the rifle, and this is how you're going to hold it in any shooting position almost. The one exception I found is you can flip it forward and shoot it like this, but you will end up burning yourself unless you're on a VTAC and then you're laying it on the VTAC and putting your hand on it, or like this so your hand does not come in contact with the barrel. You could not fight like this. You're going to be in a fighting situation. You're going to have this thing down to engage targets. There's no way around it. Are vertical grips wrong? No, absolutely they're not. I have ARs I have vertical grips on. I have AKs I have vertical grips on. But this is the only method of using it where on the AR and the AK it's more of an option, not a requirement. I know on many of my ARs, for a matter of fact, I have a vertical grip, but they become basically a hand stop. You're not doing that here, because you're not going to have fingerprints if you do this when this thing's hot. And she does get hot. The next big training scar is right here, and that's our sling swivel. And you're like, how on earth can a sling swivel be a training scar? Very simply, grab it like this. Notice I just grabbed to cock it, and I accidentally grabbed the sling, and I cannot get it to cock. Now, if the sling's not in the way, cock's no problem, but when I'm trying to grab that sling, this happened to me on stage 6 at Finnish Brutality, and I didn't realize what I had done. So I'm thinking it's jammed, so I'm like pulling it off, and then when I jam it down on the tire, yeah, it cycles perfectly because I had inadvertently or properly gotten the sling out of the way, but grabbed it like that, and I can't pull it because I'm pulling on the sling, which is stopping me. So that is a very big training scar, and one you have to be aware of, because this is the only place on the rifle you can mount the forward sling. It has a QD slot there designed for it. See, I can take the sling off and it's there. And but there's no other place around to mount that. And I'm going to play with the idea of maybe getting a rail-mounted sling attachment point and putting it somewhere on here and see how that works out, because that's the only solution I can think to come up with. But that is there, and with the sling on your rifle, that gets in the way. Now, the competition, depending on the competition, you have the option to take the sling off. But in real combat, real fighting situations, that's not something you should be doing. The other thing that I found to be a big training scar with this, and it's again dealing with the sling, is in Hatila, didn't have my gloves on, went up, racked it, and ripped open my finger on the sling swivel. Gave myself a nice little bleeding thing. Now, it didn't affect me. I went through the stage. I freely admit it cost me no time until the stage was over, and I got to go find a Band-Aid, get it out, stop the bleeding, you know, all that kind of BS, and get blood off the gun. It was more an annoyance than anything, but, you know, ripping skin open is never fun. And it comes down to just poor design. This thing's been around 50 years. Believe it or not, adopted by the Austrians in '77. This thing's been around a long time. You think by now they'd have come up with a little bit better place to put the sling, but they haven't. I'll figure out an option on that, and I'll keep working on it. But yeah, these are things with the AUG you need to be aware of. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the history of the AUG. There's plenty of other channels out there you can check out to find out the operating system, take it apart, the history of the weapon, the whole 9 yards. And I encourage you to go check those out over Forgotten Weapons or many of the other people you probably like following on the web. So I won't bore you with it because you probably already watched it. And if you haven't, go check out their channels. It's a good rifle. I got my money's worth out of it. I very much enjoyed it. I know a lot of people don't like the NATO stock from what I see online, but I found it to work great. Didn't like the fact there's no bolt hold open, but c'est la vie, because I feel that's offset completely by the fact that it'll use NATO Stanag mags, which most of my weapon systems work off of, so I don't have to have a new ecosystem of magazines for this rifle. So very happy about that. And it performed very well. Once I learned the manual of arms, it gave me no problems. I did all right with it. The times the rifle didn't perform, that was the operator's fault, not the weapon's fault. Had a few malfunctions at finish brutality, but believe it or not, those were either operator induced, like I said about like holding the charging handle and the sling at the same time. One I know for a fact was due to an overloaded magazine. Friends had loaded the magazines for me and put in 31 rounds. That'll jam up any rifle. So that, you know, the rifle itself functioned and had no problems. It held up extremely well. It was extremely accurate. One of the benefits I found of the rifle was on stage 2, where we had to fire at targets from a moving vehicle. And I do think that this being a bullpup, where its weight is biased back towards my shoulder and the bumping of the vehicle, I felt that helped me keep it on target. 13 shots, I got the 4 bonus hits, which from a moving vehicle is pretty good. I've had a lot of other moving in vehicle engagements at brutality matches where I fired a lot more rounds for a lot less hits. So I think that gave me an advantage here. The big wide open trigger guard here was by no means a disadvantage. Crawling under barbed wire, it was nice and maneuverable due to its compact size. So there are a lot of pros to this weapon system. It is an expensive weapon system, but that being said, it's also well worth it. I feel I got my money's worth out of this rifle, and I intend to keep using it. We hope you found this training scar information helpful and informative. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and tune in for future training scar videos.